excited about our next guest joining us live on Super Talk TV and on the FM dial at 99.7 WTN. Jeff Younger. Jeff has a wild story. It's a heartbreaking story and could also be seen as a cautionary tale. Jeff has had his son stolen from him by the ex-wife and the California legal system. And I think I may be simplifying it, but it's heartbreaking because what Jeff's wife wants to do is not what Jeff wants to do when it comes to one of his boys. Can you kind of give us a brief synopsis of when this all began? I understand you were divorced in 2019, but where this began and how we got to where we are now with you and your boys and your ex-wife.
I was still married, and my ex-wife tried to transition my son to a girl. And when I objected to it, she filed for divorce. She's a pediatrician, and she used her relationship with licensed care providers, forced me out of my home. I moved a mile up the road. If you go on to YouTube, you can search for a video, Mommy Says I'm a Girl. It went kind of viral. And it's the first iPhone video I ever took. And it's my son telling me that his mother's telling him he's a girl and he believes her.
I remember seeing that video as it was going viral and feeling that just infuriated for you. Because at the time, your son was saying, you know, I'm not.
That's right. That's right. And she really ramped it up. I mean, she began to put him in a dress and present him to the world as a girl. Eventually, it got to the point where I was taking my son to school in Coppell, Texas. And I would take him to school in boys' clothes because he always presented as a boy with me, and he only presented as a girl with his mom. You'd think the courts would choose the normal route of development, but they consistently have not. Even though my boy could have had a normal life being raised as a boy with me, he was perfectly comfortable as a boy with me. I'd take him to school in boys' clothes, and the teacher would give him a dress, put him in a dress, and they'd make him use the girls' restroom behind my back. They did it in secret. And I discovered that's legal in all 50 states.
And this wasn't in California at the time, though, correct? This was in Texas.
Is Coppell, Texas, yeah.
Which is even more mind-blowing. Because
Yes.
you think of Texas as a more conservative state, but that wasn't the case for you. That wasn't your experience.
No, Texas has a conservative electorate, but it's ruled by liberal Republicans. That's what you need to understand about Texas. So I found out about them transitioning my son at school. I started really opposing this with the school. I filed grievances and everything, and that led to another trial in 2019. The judge heard all the evidence, gave me 50-50 custody, no child support, and most importantly, a check on all medical procedures. And the liberal judges in Dallas County, Texas, got really upset by that, and they transferred the case into the 301st District Court with Judge Bloody Mary Brown. Bloody Mary systematically stripped me of all parental rights using temporary orders, because in Texas, temporary orders in family court cannot be appealed. So she knew she had no oversight. Eventually, she gave me supervised visitation because I wouldn't stop trying to pass a law in Texas. I literally lost my kids because of political activism to outlaw chemical castration of children. Because I refused to attend the supervised visitations because the supervisor was himself transgender and refused to let me change my son out of a dress and refused to let me pray with my children.
That's heartbreaking.
Because I refused. Yeah.
So you couldn't even pray with your kids?
No.
I mean, with all this happening, I mean, it sounds like, you know, it's become kind of routine for you to tell your story, but I want to know about like the human element. How are you feeling as a father at that time? I can imagine you feel pretty helpless.
Yeah. I mean, here's the best way I could describe it. Imagine over a long period, this has been 10 years. You have to sit there and you're in a chair and you have to watch someone attempt to sexually abuse your child. And if you ever act out emotionally, a judge will put you in jail and take your kid away from you forever, and you'll never be able to protect him. You have to be calm and collected while they try to sexually abuse your child. That's exactly emotionally what it feels like.
Ugh. It's heartbreaking, man. So then you're in these supervised visits. The person that is supervising the visits is transgender. You're not allowed to change your boy out of the dress.
Mhm.
What do you do at that point?
Well, I made a decision about several things when all this started. I said, number one, I'm never going to harm my son. Number two, I'm never going to let my resources be used to harm my son. And number three, I'm never going to stop trying to protect my son and tell him the truth. So I've always tried to leave I know because I figured I'd lose contact eventually. So I've always tried to leave a big public record that I was protecting him and doing the right thing for him. So he'll know in the end what happened. So what the judge said is, well, you haven't visited your children, so I'm going to allow your ex-wife to move to California since you haven't been visiting your kids anyway.
Wow.
So you see what the courts do. They create the conditions where you can't obey the orders, and then they hold you accountable and punish you for not following the very orders that they created that you can't follow. I went to the Texas Supreme Court over this because I had successfully passed a law in Texas. It took me 6 years and about a couple $100,000 of my own money, but I got the Texas legislature to outlaw these barbaric practices on children and shut down $1 billion industry in this state.
Thank God.
And I earned the anger of most of the establishment Republicans in Texas because of that. I was actually banned from the Capitol for a while.
Really?
Oh yeah.
They just didn't want to hear what you were having to say, or what you were causing too much of a ruckus.
Yes.
What would make them upset with you in this situation? That kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand what's actually happening in the Republican Party and what the fundamental problem in the Republican Party is about. And this really relates to Trump and a lot of other issues in the party. It turns out that the donor class of the Republican Party are Northeastern liberals, and they're actually far left people. The largest donor to the Republican Party is Paul Singer. Paul Singer founded the Human Rights Campaign, and the Human Rights Campaign initiated the transgender movement in the United States. So the transgender movement was started by Republicans. It was not started by Democrats. And I'm a lifelong Republican, and I was shocked to find this out. Paul Singer's Human Rights Campaign is the most powerful LGBT lobby group in the world, and they're the reason that our embassies were flying the pride flag at every country in the world. They're the ones that had the power to do that. So you have a liberal donor class, and then you have an extremely conservative electorate. So imagine you're an elected official. How do you solve this problem? Here's how you solve it. When I got that bill passed here in Texas, they removed 3 sentences from the bill. And those 3 sentences would have classified these procedures as felony child sexual abuse, which in Texas would get you put in a maximum security prison for life. You'd go to a gladiator farm and you'd be lucky to make it out. So it would have been a huge deterrent, but most importantly, because it would be felony child abuse, you could not take your child out of Texas in order to do these procedures. You can't take your child to another country, another state to abuse them.
Yep.
So it would have prevented that. But see, they wanted the loophole to let kids go to other states, because here's how they play the game. They go to the conservative electorate and they say, you see how conservative I am? I voted to outlaw these barbaric procedures. Vote for me. Then they go to their liberal donor class and they say, you see how great I am? I left those loopholes for your people. Now you can give me money. So if you want to know why Republicans pass bills like border bills that never stop anything at the border, it's because they pass bills that look conservative, so you vote for them, and then they leave loopholes so the liberal donor class will keep giving them money.
It's always about the money, isn't it?
It's always about the money, because you need money to get elected. You can't get elected without money.
Yep.
I ran for office here in Texas, and it was my political speech when I was running for office that lost me my children. That's what was presented at court. And they said I was violating a gag order by my political speech. And I spent $160,000, but my opponent spent $4.5 million. I mean, I only lost by 1,300 votes, but it shows you that with money can defeat good intentions. And so money is important.
And we've seen examples of that here in Tennessee, where you had state reps that were voting against transgender bills, and then they spend a lot of money in the state races, and then they win.
That's right. That's how it works.
It's insane.
It's insane. And I'm going to say something that most people won't say. We have a serious problem with our Republican voters. I'll just tell you, before I ran for office, I went to visit Democrat clubs in Dallas County under a false name to just see how the Democrats organize. I wanted to see what my opponents did and how they worked, right?
Yeah. Smart.
So you go to a Republican club meeting, what happens? You have a cocktail soiree, you have a charismatic speaker, you do a little networking, you go home and you go to bed, right? I go to this Democrat meeting, and it was first of all, it was at noon on a Saturday, and I was like, who the heck would go to a meeting at noon on Saturday? Well, would you be at the park throwing a football or something?
Yep.
So, well, it turns out liberals don't do stuff like that, you know. So I show up. It's in a gymnasium. I was like, I showed up in a suit, thinking it was going to be like a Republican event. It's in a gymnasium. I said, "Hey, I'm a Republican. I want to become a Democrat. I've been swayed, by your arguments," and put on a big show about it. And the lady said, "Well, what particularly interests you?" And I said, "The transgender issue interests me." And she looked on this list. She said, "Go on over to table 6." I go over to table 6, and there are these 2 blue-haired lesbians there, and they give me an entire plan to take over my voting precinct. And they were like, if you can get 50 people, we'll give you a free website. If you get 100 people and half of them show up to our planned protests, we'll put a donation button and you keep 25%. You know, they had a whole plan for me to take over my precinct.
Wow.
So you just compare that to what Republicans do. So I found that Republican voters are extremely vulnerable to enemy propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And in the primaries, they consistently vote for establishment liberal candidates rather than conservatives. And I've just seen it time and time again.
It's insane. So where are you at today with your sons? I caught wind of an X post that you put out, and a mutual friend had sent it to me and said, you got to get this guy on your show. Where does the case stand today with your 2 sons and your ex-wife?
Well, when they gave her the right to move to California, I took it up to the Texas Supreme Court, which is supposed to be very conservative, and said, look, I passed a law against transing kids in Texas. She's moving my son to California with the explicit aim of committing child abuse under Texas law. So you can't allow her to move to Texas. The district judge has abused her discretion. And this Texas Supreme Court ruled against me and actually said that she was no more likely to transition my son to a girl in California than she would be in Texas, which is transparently ridiculous.
Yeah.
What it really was is the Republican establishment here was so upset that I forced a public vote by everybody on that transgender bill that they wanted me to move to California. They wanted to get me out of California so I wouldn't be a bee in their bonnet anymore. So anyway, she moves to California. I have to go to trial in California. The judge in California illegally seals the trial. It's against California law to do that. You can only do it in one instance, and that's in a parentage action. This is not a parentage action. They denied the press access to the court. They didn't allow court watchers. All of the transcripts are sealed. So we had a secret trial. And after it's a 7-day trial, I did it without a lawyer because I don't use lawyers anymore. And I destroyed their expert witnesses, proved that my ex-wife had given a false history to the care providers. She never told the care providers that my son consistently presented as a boy with me, for example, which you'd think would be very important.
Yeah, it's a big piece to leave out.
Yeah, he totally ignored that in his ruling. Literally, my expert's name doesn't even appear. She testified for an entire day. Her name doesn't even appear in the ruling. He gave me all contact must be supervised. Even my telephone conversations I have to pay for a supervisor. We have to communicate through this special program. We can't communicate by email or anything. She was given what in Texas would be called sole managing conservatorship. It's called sole legal custody in California, meaning that she has all the parental rights and I don't have any parental rights. So now she has free reign to go and chemically castrate my son. My guess is that he went in the clinic already this week and probably has his puberty blocked right now.
Jeez, it's heartbreaking. And it's your son, and I want to make sure that I'm being careful with my language. I don't want to offend you, but it's like, even if you believe in that ideology, the puberty blockers actually don't help, because then if you want to get the surgeries that would transition you later down the road, they don't work. Even with their own logic, it doesn't make any sense to do the puberty blockers.
You're right, which tells you that they're lying. The reason that they block puberty is that puberty is the cure for gender dysphoria. They're blocking the cure to maintain the illness.
And we've seen studies where after a few years, many kids grow out of it as a phase.
98%. 98% post-puberty just identify with their biological sex with no problems.
Insanity. So what are you doing now? I'm assuming that the fight is going to continue in some form or fashion. What are your next steps?
Well, I told the judge in court under no uncertain terms, because one of the things that I do is I just don't, family court's full of lies, but I don't lie in family court. And I tell these judges the truth. And the judge said that Mr. Younger, you have been relentless in your campaign against these transgender procedures and using your children's case to bolster that. And I just asked him point blank. I said, well, you're a judge, you're a lawyer. Don't you know that all laws are made from specific cases? We don't just make up laws from abstract principles. Laws come out of the application of the real world to the statutes. So I have to use my son's case as an example to get laws passed. And I said, I'm putting you on notice right now. I'm going to outlaw these practices in California just like I did in Texas. And this ruling is going to be overturned, and it's going to be looked upon as a gross abuse of the law when I get that law passed. And they laughed and they said, well, our legislature is a little different. So I'm not going to the legislature. You have a proposition system, and I can bypass the legislature. And I polled it in California, and 80% of Democrats don't want to do this to children either. I said, this is going to be illegal. And I don't intend to ever stop trying that. Now that my kids live in California, I have to protect them here. So first of all, I'm going to continue political activism in California, and I'm going to outlaw these procedures in California. Secondly, I'm going to go up on appeal. I'm going to seek a stay, and I'm going to try to go up to the California senior courts and try to overturn this decision, because it seems to me that it's illegitimate because much of the evidence wasn't considered in the ruling. Third, I'm going to work with the Trump administration to make sure that they follow through with their promise to outlaw these practices and federally decertify hospitals that do this stuff to children. And I'm going to make sure that they follow through on that promise on day one.
Hey, Jeff, we are behind you all the way. How can we support you in this fight?
Well, the best way to support me is to work in your own communities and outlaw these procedures and classify them as child abuse. If we do that, we can eradicate these practices, and we don't need to worry about the donor class and the big donor hospitals. That's the most important thing. Second thing is, if you want to help with my legal expenses, you can go to SaveJames.org, O-R-G, SaveJames.org, not .com. SaveJames.com has been taken over by leftists.
SaveJames.org.
And you can also find me on Twitter at Jeff Younger Show. I don't actually have a show, but my life had become so public, like the Truman Show. It's kind of a joke. At Jeff Younger Show. And then I have a Substack where I write about the origins of the transgender movement, the social genealogy, the intellectual history of the left at jeffyounger.substack.com.
Jeff, I really appreciate you taking some time to share your story with us. We'll be praying for you, and keep fighting the good fight, man. God bless you.